Hey everyone, welcome to the Listen to This Bull live show. That's Remington waving at you with three weird fingers, and my name is Matt Mulholland. That's the Jack Hanks maneuver. Today we have a very interesting show, but let me tell you what the deal is. We've got someone who is an amazing policy interpreter, someone that I could ask a weird question to, know that we're going to go down 5 different rabbit holes and end up someplace really unique and awesome. And both of us are a little bit scatterbrained, so it's really interesting getting us in the same room. He's fantastic. But he's also not here yet. So, which is odd because I've been on Zoom with him for the last, for several hours today. So he knows how to get on this. He was trying it out earlier today. But he will be on with us in just a little bit. Dare I say policy guru? I do dare. I'm a very daring individual, and I dare to say that he is a policy guru. There are a few people that I would go to before Leland Coontz, and only because they're closer to me and I'm talking to them already if I had a question about a policy. If you know him online at all, you know that he's going to, there he is, he's in the wings. He made it just in time, so I'm going to pull him on in just a second. If you know Leland at all, you know that if he's going to make any kind of a post, it's going to be very, very detailed and filled with some fantastic information and a way of thinking about the language that you haven't thought of. I learn a lot from this man. I'm looking forward to having him on.
Let's do it. And Matt, you love getting in the weeds, man. So this is perfect.
I do.
It's perfect.
It's my favorite. Big fan of Leland Coontz. All right, Leland, hopefully you're ready. Let's see if your audio works.
Oh, hey, look how maybe I need to rub my camera a little bit because it seems all blurry there.
Could be the reflection off of your it's definitely the camera.
Should I turn the light off?
Maybe.
Let me go turn
I think
the light
he was
off.
smoking cigars in there for like the last 4 hours. That's my prediction.
What if he still has the plastic film on his camera that it came with or something? You know what I mean?
I wonder why it's blurry.
Anyway, are you the kind of guy that keeps the plastic film on your new electronics, Leland?
You can't. No, I always take that off. Even if it's someone else's product, I'll just take it off so that it's because I can't stand it.
I'm with you. I can't handle it. I don't understand how people can get away with that. It's crazy.
So, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I did this amazing intro for you talking about how you are some kind of a policy guru. So I'm really hoping.
Look, I got to correct you on that because you know what? Nobody knows anything. The thing is, I think they did studies where people were professors and they ask them, what about this? The graduate students always say, oh, that's easy. Here's the answer. But the professors that actually know more say, I don't know. So maybe I'm wise to say I don't know because there's just too much in this business to know. The other thing too, and this really comes up so often, and I think a lot of people miss this, is I work in California and every state is different. And
that's
people,
true.
They're just used to the way it works in their state and they don't even know why it works that way. So they'll tell you like, oh, you got to file this proof of loss, or, oh, the insurance company is going to have to pay interest on late payment, or they can exclude your claim for this reason. Well,
a lot of that is very state specific, though, with case law and different things to tie into it. Different statutes.
People don't even realize why. They don't know why the rule is that way.
What are you drinking?
Coffee.
Oh.
I collect coffee cups, so I go to the thrift store. So this one, it has, I think it has Japanese writing with names of all the animals translated in Japanese. So
interesting.
Can you read the Japanese?
I think that's Japanese. Does it look Japanese? So I guess it is. But I'm always looking for weird coffee cups.
That's pretty cool.
I'm going to note that.
Yeah.
When we find one, we got to have to send it out to California. That's why he's drinking coffee. It's still like 9:30
You guys want to see my coffee cup collection? You want me to show it to you?
Why not?
Shoot.
Do you think it's the wildfire smoke that's causing that? Maybe there's just so much smoke in the air that it's impregnated itself on the backside of the glass for his camera.
There's all kinds of theories. Let's send an engineer out there. Let's get this figured out.
I like to think about Leland Coontz and anything that has to do with impregnating anything
Okay, so
at the same time.
well, I have 3 children. Okay, so now here's another one. Okay, so
That he
this
knows
one,
of.
now see this one. See, this is sushi. This has all the Japanese sushi on it.
There's a bit of a theme going on here so far.
Well, for some reason, a lot of the interesting cups are Asian. Now, this one, I love this one. Okay, this is a Scrabble cup. And
Oh.
I really think this relates to insurance claims. Because
If that was
let's
Scrabble,
say like a tree hits your roof
uh-huh.
and one branch punctures a piece of sheathing. Okay. Well, now you go from a repair of a shingle that you can match.
Yeah.
Now you might go to full roof replacement. And so in Scrabble, you know, what you're trying to do is you're trying to play your letters, and then you want to get like triple word score and double word score.
Sure.
So, you know, in claims, you're looking for that detail that will double the size of your claim. So
You make it sound like it's a game of some kind.
Did I say that?
No, you didn't say it.
No, it's a very serious thing, and we don't ever exaggerate claims. We just ask for what we're owed. But sometimes it's a lot, and sometimes we have to double the insurance company's initial offer or even triple it.
I love
I
how
think
he makes
that
it scrap.
looking for those triggers is definitely a good thing. And every policy is going to have slightly different triggers. But I know that if I were to ask you some specifics about a claim, we would go into some fun rabbit holes. So what I'm asking the audience to do today is to give us some weird policy questions. Ask
And we
Leland
have
a
an
weird
attorney.
policy question.
And Mr. Huggins is an attorney, so whatever I say that's wrong, he can correct it.
We could just give some disclaimer language up front. If Leland says anything that is inaccurate, it is because he made a mistake. If he says anything that is completely accurate, it is because he is brilliant.
No, it's probably by accident.
It's simply Leland's opinion, and that's it, everybody. Take it with a grain of salt. There you go. There's the
It's a
disclosure.
show of opinion.
Where's our
Now
question?
we're ready to rock and roll.
Nobody's
So
asking
I'm-
a question yet.
So
No
far,
holding
everybody
back.
is stuck on this hazy camera for some reason. So we are a little bit curious about the smoke damage that's out there from fire losses. Do you guys get a lot of smoke
Yes,
damage claims?
Lots of them.
Are you
Well,
looking for
one of the-
soot everywhere?
One of the carrier's defenses. Well, okay, so you got to be careful because there's ash, soot, char, and smoke, and they're all different. Now, with the California Fair Plan, which is a named peril policy, it covers fire, but it does not cover windblown ash. So when I used to do now for
But-
those who
Okay.
for those who are not familiar with the named peril policies, you have on the one hand you have your all risk policy, which is the old term. Now they like to say open peril because the insurance companies don't want to give the false impression that the policy covers everything. So most homeowners have an HO3, which is a standard ISO form,
Mhm.
and it's considered quote unquote open peril, or it used to be called all risk, which basically means it covers everything that's not excluded. So it doesn't cover intentional acts, it doesn't cover flood, it doesn't cover terrorism like bin Laden blowing up your house, that wouldn't be covered. But your name peril
If he
policy,
blows up the next door neighbor, you're good.
well, okay, but you're getting me off track. So the name peril policy, okay, like California Fair Plan, and then Louisiana has a fair plan. A lot of states, Georgia has a fair plan.
Yep.
Those are name peril. Okay, so you got to have one of the perils such as explosion, fire, smoke, vandalism, some types of theft, collapse. Sometimes is a peril. It's got to be one of the perils. So if you have, for example, a water leak, those aren't covered because it's not a peril unless you can show that the water leak was due to fire, which is covered, or the water leak was due to vandalism, which is covered. So
Right.
the burden of proof is on the insured to say, hey, this water leak was caused by my tenant. And then the insured shows the adjuster the smartphone and says, look at these messages from my gang member tenant saying that he's going to mess me up and, you know, he hates me and he's going to ruin the house. And plus, why are 3 sinks leaking? Okay, let's look at this is what the public adjuster would say. Let's look at the totality of the evidence. Okay, 1 sink leaking, maybe that's just, a leak. But why do we have peanut butter on the ceiling in 4 rooms? And there's an X cut in the carpet in the middle of every room. And we have a golf ball in 2 drains and 3 sinks leaking. If you look at the totality of the evidence, what else can you conclude? That leaks aren't covered, but these leaks must be from vandalism. And so if you can,
Peanut butter on the ceilings?
I'm just saying, because like if you have ketchup on the wall in the kitchen, okay, maybe that's just somebody
Right.
being sloppy.
But no one's gonna squirt
Yeah,
peanut butter accidentally
what
onto
if
the
you
ceiling.
have-
So it's clearly an
Like
intentional
with
act.
ketchup on the bed,
I'm with
yeah.
you.
If you
It's
have ketchup on
intentional.
the bedroom wall,
All right.
So you got to look at the totality of the evidence. And so then part of the evidence too, that, the adjuster has the duty to investigate the claim, at least in California, that's right in the regulations. And it's a good faith duty to investigate the claim. So what if the homeowner is saying like, yeah, this guy told me he's going to mess up my house. And, look at my smartphone. He sent me these messages saying about how he's going to mess up my house. And so the adjuster's like, okay, yeah, whatever. Thank you. Now, why didn't the adjuster take out his camera and take a photograph of that screenshot? Now, okay, granted, maybe that's not super professional way to record the evidence, but that's what you have at the point of the inspection. So take a photograph of the screenshot, and then you also ask the insured to save the screenshot and email it to you, so you have it in a better format. But I think, in my personal opinion, the adjuster is negligent if they don't make written notes of that information or photograph the screen, because sure enough, what they'll do is they'll deny the vandalism claim later. They'll say you didn't prove vandalism, and then I'll take the case as a public adjuster and I'll find out that there were text messages from the from the tenant threatening to mess up the property. Now, okay, look, in the insurance company's defense, they could say, well, that doesn't prove that the tenant did it. Okay, fair enough. But what's your excuse for not including that evidence in your investigation? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And I've seen that many times. I've seen it many times where evidence of vandalism is ignored. I'm kind of going off.
We have the opposite problem for most of the claims that I deal with. They only look at the evidence of vandalism and they stop looking at the evidence that it could be wind related or something along those lines.
Right. You're talking about wind claims.
So
I get a lot of like your typical daily claims. So I get like plumbing leaks, vandalism.
We even get our policyholders accused of arson often if it's a fire loss or something along those lines.
Right. And so, the adjuster's supposed to look at all of the evidence. So going back to your fire loss, or your smoke claim with California Fair Plan, that's a named peril policy, and they cover smoke.
The smoke is or the fire is?
They cover smoke and they cover fire.
Smoke is a named peril. Interesting.
Yes, it is.
All right.
And so the problem is windblown ash is not a named peril.
Does it apply with the proximate cause doctrine though? If not, but for the fire, there would not have been
different
ash.
Things. Now, okay, let me explain this to you. Right? They could both occur in the same event, but one doesn't cause the other. In other words, you don't have
one can't be caused without the other, though.
Okay, let me explain. You don't have windblown ash because you have smoke. Okay, you could say that you have smoke because you have fire. Like the saying, "Where there's smoke, there's fire." Right? But you can't necessarily say that you have windblown ash because you have smoke. Okay, they may come from the same wildfire that's 10 miles away, but you don't have windblown ash because you have smoke. You might have both, and they might come from the same fire. So what the California Fair Plan would say is they say, hey, your windblown ash is not a covered peril. But what the homeowner can do is say, okay, fine, but what about the smoke? I got to clean the smoke off my wall. So, don't pay for my windblown ash.
I think that's a silly thing, though. The smoke is getting there via the wind also. So it's windblown smoke, and the smoke is an ensuing issue from the fire. The ash wouldn't exist if it wasn't. It's the exact same thing. That's weird that they apply it differently. But
I think they've won that argument in
oddly, the fire, if it's a forest fire creates a lot of heat energy, and it actually could create the wind by changing temperature differentials, and temperature differential is what causes wind. You have air movement.
Let's say you have a huge fire making all this smoke, right? And then the wind is blowing east, and so houses to the east of the fire get all the smoke in the window. They have their air conditioning on, all the smoke comes in, right? And people are choking on the smoke, right? Well, that would be a named peril under the named peril policy. But let's say that the wind shifts like the next day when the fire is put out, and now the wind is blowing the other direction, and a whole bunch of houses on the other side of the fire have all this white ash, because we see it sometimes in California. Like I live in Santa Ana. I don't live near any well, we do have some fires that come up in the canyons, like to the east of us from time to time, but most of the wildfires are miles away. and I'll sometimes have white ashes on my car. It looks like snow, not a huge amount, but I'll have little white ashes. So the thing is that the Fair Plan's position is windblown ash is not a named peril, and you can have ashes land on your property and not have smoke. So this is where a lot of times, you're talking.
No, the difference here is that we're talking about the named peril policy. So if it isn't a named peril, even if the proximate call, although I still think that you could make that argument for the proximate calls. I know Remington would.
Yeah, but see, the ash is not caused by the smoke. Okay,
But fire is a named peril. and it's
Right.
caused by the
Okay,
fire.
now you're hitting it on the head,
Yeah,
because see,
that's
where you
what
would
I've been
make the
thinking the
argument.
last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's where you would make the argument. You would say that, okay, ash may be excluded or not covered, right? But fire is. Okay, so now what happened is there's an insurance company that starts with F, and it's like an agricultural type of word, okay? And they had a $5,000 smoke cleanup limit. Now these are HO3 policies, so they're all risk, so it's different. But they started telling all the homeowners that because like the first time we did the Glendale fires, I was working for the carrier, and we were routinely paying $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for smoke cleanup. That was getting paid all the time. Now what the carriers have done is they've gone to the serpros and service masters, and they've told them that they need to lowball their numbers. And I know some of the serpros that I talk to that I have a good relationship with, they'll admit to me that the carrier is telling them, insisting that they lower their number to a number, like when they do bid comparisons, they're telling the serpro to lower their number to a number that the serpro isn't willing to do the work for. Okay. And so they've really tightened up their procedures to lower these. They don't want to be paying $50,000, $60,000.
How does that benefit ServPro?
Oh, because they're a preferred vendor and they want to stay in good graces with the insurance company.
But if they can't do the work for that price, regardless,
See, they're not. Okay, they're not. So let's say Matthew Mulholland hires, Joe's Cleanup, and Joe's Cleanup gets a hygienist, and they write a protocol that we're gonna change the filters, we're gonna clean the ducts, we're gonna put in negative air machines, we're gonna shampoo the carpets, we're gonna wipe down everything, we're gonna do all this stuff, and then it's $50,000, right? Well, then the carrier will bring in a serpro, and the serpro will be ordered to write a lowball estimate. And the serpro knows they're not getting the work anyway, so it's not like they're going to shoot themselves in the foot unless somehow they got caught, colluding with the carrier or something. But those cases are really hard to win. Attorneys like the idea, but it's not workable to try to sue the insurance company and the serpro for conspiring and stuff like that. I mean, everybody gets pissed off and they're emotional about it, but it's like, try to bring that court case. Like, good luck.
Yeah,
so,
no kidding.
So the thing is that now I got off track again. So on these smoke claims, okay, what happened is this carrier had a $5,000 limit, and it's my understanding. See, this is an example of, like, I know a little bit, but I don't know everything. It's too much to know. It's my understanding that the attorneys got together, and a bunch of plaintiff attorneys, and they all get together on Facebook or some kind of secret website where they can talk to each other. And they did what's called a mass tort in California, which is similar to a class action lawsuit. And they sued this carrier and said, look, smoke is this is my wording, because I don't know exactly what the argument was that they made, but something along the lines of, hey, smoke is basically the daughter of fire. It's the same as fire. So California is a standard fire policy state. So for those of you who are not familiar, New York adopted a standard fire policy, and it's kind of like a lot of reforms where, when you get a mortgage, the mortgage company has to quote you the interest rate according to the the Fair Credit Practices Act or whatever, because everybody can calculate interest different ways. And so when you're trying to comparison shop apples to apples, every mortgage company in the United States has to quote the interest rate according to the same methodology that's required.
Right.
Okay,
They've got to tell you how much you're going to end
Right.
up spending through the life of the loan if you pay the minimum payments.
So in America, what we have is this idea that it's a Wild West free market, but we have to do disclosure. So everybody has to disclose. Now, you can also take it a step further and say everybody has to do business in a very certain way. Forget about just disclosing it. Everybody's got to do business the same exact way. So what the New York, the wise people in New York at one point. They said, look, we can't have every insurance company doing a different policy and hiding. This is my guess on how this worked historically. Imagine if one insurance company is really tricky and they exclude some things that everyone else is paying for. Then the consumer might be getting cheated out of something that everyone else is paying. And we're thinking they're getting cheated because who can read 20 pages of a policy? So what we need to do is have some standardization here. And we're going to write like a bare minimum policy, and everybody's got to give at least that bare minimum. Now, if your policy doesn't cover, like say if you buy an insurance policy for your house and it doesn't cover fire, who would ever imagine that? So if you don't have a standard fire policy, you could always argue the doctrine of reasonable expectations. You could say, like, what person in the world would expect to pay for a policy on their house and find out later that it doesn't cover fire? That's idiotic. Okay.
Is that something that you've made that argument yourself as a public adjuster?
That's an argument that an attorney can make. And
that's a great attorney argument. Yeah.
That's a very hard argument to make, because most of the time,
as a PA, yeah, you're not winning that as a PA.
Well, for an attorney, no, it's only an attorney can do that, and it's very hard. But so let's say most of the time in the real world, the homeowner policy is going to cover fire. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to have a situation where an attorney can say, oh, you were very tricky and you left fire out of your policy. That's not going to happen. But what they might do is they might leave other little things out that are maybe some fringe things. And so if you, as an attorney, if you try to go to court and say, hey, any reasonable person would expect the policy to cover this. And so don't try to blame the victim. Don't try to say that the homeowner should have read your 8-point type policy and found this exclusion on page 17. That's not realistic. Any reasonable person would have expected that this policy would cover water leaks. So you can't be excluding water leaks. So, but that's not
why an RCV policy. You would expect it to have RCV coverage instead of like an RPS schedule or something.
Right. Imagine if they say we're going to give you replacement cost coverage, but then it's illusory. The word illusory, because there's like no way you can get it. Like it's so hard to get that. Yeah, technically you're entitled to it, but it's like no one could ever do it. So then it would. So going back to the standard fire policy. So the standard fire policy was a reform in New York that was designed to say, here's what a basic policy should cover. And everybody has to be on the same page. All the insurance companies, if you want to do business in New York, you got to have the same standard fire policy. And then a whole bunch of other states adopted that. And California is one of them.
Most of the states adopted it. I took a look into it. It's somewhere in the 40 range of the 50 states. So vast majority.
We're not lawyers. Okay. I'm not a lawyer. So I'm just smart enough to be dangerous. But, one time I had a conversation with an attorney where he told me like, hey, we lost this case and we're thinking about whether we should appeal it or not. And, here's the issue. I don't remember what the issue is off the top of my head, but I asked him, I said, well, did you guys argue that was that when the insurance company applied the exclusion, did you argue that that they would have been paid under the standard fire policy? Did you argue that the policy? So see, the insurance policies don't follow the law. A lot of clauses in the policy are technically illegal. And
so there's a difference there, and this is a state-specific thing. I happen to know that in the state of Georgia, the standard fire policy does exist, but there is case law that says our code says that you have to follow the it's a standard fire policy. So for fire type policies is what our statute says for a lot of things.
Oh, okay, it's in other words, it says policies that cover fire must be written in this way.
So it's specific only because of case law in Georgia that the standard fire policy applies only to the perils of fire and lightning. Any other peril doesn't have to meet the same requirements.
No, see, in California, I'm not an attorney, so I could be wrong on this, but it's my understanding that in California, the rule is that if you have a policy that covers fire, then you have to give the same coverage of the standard fire policy.
That's the way it should have been. I agree.
The standard fire policy applies to other perils, not just fire. Okay.
It should.
So maybe other states have interpreted that differently and said, no, it only applies to the peril of fire. But going back to the standard fire policy, that also has a clause for appraisal. Okay.
It does.
So a lot of policies will have an appraisal clause that conflicts with the standard fire policy. So circling back to this $5,000 limit that this one carrier had for smoke, because they got tired of paying all these smoke claims. Like Glendale, California got hit with massive smoke from wildfires 3 times. Okay, I've been up there twice as an adjuster and once as a PA doing smoke claims, and they're paying out $50,000 and more for each house, and they didn't want to pay it anymore. So they said, okay, we're going to maximum cap is 5,000. Well, the standard fire policy doesn't have any, in California and other states too, it doesn't have a cap on payment for fire. So these attorneys got together and they did a mass tort. This is my understanding of it, where they said you can't put a cap on smoke because smoke is from the cause of fire. Okay, smoke is fire. So even though the name peril policy has two perils,
and it's separated smoke out from fire.
Smoke and fire, right?
But fire is one of the losses that's specifically covered, and fire doesn't have that limit.
Right. And then on your homeowner policy, they don't have the name perils, right? So,
I'm going to make a guess here before you finish the story. I'm going to guess that they determined that if there's two perils, both of them covered, one has a limit and one doesn't, the one that provides the additional coverage is going to be the one that should be applied in a
well, you're talking
as long as it's unambiguous on anything.
You're making a great point, but it's kind of different. Okay, so
okay,
I think what you're saying is, like, say if you have ash and smoke both.
Sure.
Well, the insurance company has to pay to clean up. Say, okay, let's back up.
But if there's a limit in ash, specific, like $10,000 limit only, if the smoke doesn't have a limit.
Okay, we're going to confuse a lot of stuff here, so I got to take it slowly. If you have a name peril policy, wind-blown ash is not a peril. So you're shit out of luck for ash, period, end of story. That's no matter what. However, they got to pay for the smoke cleanup. And if you have smoke, and you might need to get a hygienist to show that you have smoke, then you're going to get a free ash cleanup at the same time they do the smoke cleanup. Now, if you're switching back to
with mold and water quite often here. If there's a mold limit, but you have water damage, the water damage, especially if it's Cat 3, is going to end up paying for roughly the same thing as the mold.
Now, but let's forget about name peril, because I remember name peril is the odd duck. Okay, you guys need to be aware of those policies, especially if you work in fire zones or in inner city areas. You know, they are out there. There's a lot of them. Okay, I mean, I did them for 9 years. I did hundreds and hundreds of these claims, but most of the time, people are going to run into an HO3, okay, or one of the commercial policies that are not name peril. So on those, that's where this one carrier had a $5,000 smoke limit. And what the attorneys in California argued is like, hey, smoke is fire, and you can't limit fire because the standard fire policy doesn't limit fire. So regardless of what your policy says, you can't do that.
Did they say is fire or is the result of fire?
Well, I don't know exactly what argument they
makes
made.
The peril fire. Are they trying to argue approximate cause?
I think they just argued that. Probably they. Okay, so now let's talk about efficient proximate cause. In California,
at some point, we're going to have to answer people's questions.
In California is really big on the efficient proximate cause. So in California, if you have a mudslide, the Department of Insurance, the commissioner sent out a bulletin saying if you have a mudslide where mud comes over your sliding glass door, they didn't say it quite like this. Because the hills always lose all their plants, and then the rain comes right after the fire, and all this mud comes in your door. Okay. Well, the commissioner sent out a bulletin to the insurance companies telling them that has to be paid under the fire. If you have a homeowner policy or name peril for that matter, you cannot say that the mudslide that happened 30 days later is a separate cause of loss and excluded because it's earth movement or flood damage or whatever. Your NFIP flood policy will cover mud if it's like a milkshake consistency. But if it's like a big chunk of, and we have this all the time in California where hillsides will crack off.
The earth movement at that point, right? If it's mostly, okay.
Right, but what the insurance commissioner said is forget about that. You just have to pay it as part of the fire loss. And I thought it was really interesting because they didn't make a distinction about, how many days after the fire you have the mudslide. And they also didn't seem to make a distinction about if the mud is coming from a hill that you don't even own, sliding into your house that you do own. But that rule would not be true next door in Nevada or Arizona. Because the California Supreme Court has issued rulings on the doctrine of efficient proximate cause. Yeah, and so our anti-concurrent causation language in California is not legal, basically, by the Supreme Court. That's my understanding. So anti-concurrent causation language basically says, okay, we cover fire, but we don't cover mudslide. And if your mudslide is any way related whatsoever to a fire, like before the fire, after the fire, cause of the fire, same time as fire, like we don't care. You're just shut up. We're not paying you.
All right. So
That's
The
not valid
Earth,
in
when it
California.
was created, had a bunch of volcanoes, which created fires all over the place. And a lot of those fires put chemicals into the atmosphere, creating the atmosphere. And the atmosphere has the weather events. And because of all these big volcanoes, it created the weather events by just making an atmosphere. All of this, every peril has to do with fire. In fact, humans wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for those volcanoes. So even vandalism is
No,
fire.
because that's not an efficient proximate cause.
It's not efficient. Okay.
No, so let's say that somebody in New York waves a gun at a truck, and the person gets so paranoid they decide to hit the pedal to the metal and drive to California, and they're still so stressed out a week later that they run into a building. Well, I'm not an attorney, so Mr. Huggins can probably explain this because I'm just guessing here, but I'm thinking that's not an efficient proximate cause. Now, if you wave the
There's
gun,
a separate. The chain of events is broken. Is the idea?
Yeah, the standard
I was
is
being silly.
the
Yeah.
standard is what would a prudent person do in that situation? That's what it is.
okay, so there you go. So if you wave a gun on the street in Brooklyn and the person immediately swerves and hits a fire hydrant, and the fire hydrant shoots water in the air and it lands on the roof and collapses the roof, which causes the electrical panel to tear off, which triggers a fire next door. I'm guessing that you could say that the cause of the fire was the person waving the gun, but it really wouldn't matter because fire is covered anyway. But if these events had like weeks separating them, then you could say, well, that's not the efficient proximate cause.
Because the chain of events has been broken, and now a separate chain of events has started.
Let me
At
give
least
you an
that's the way the definition
yeah.
works.
Let me
You
give
do
you an
have to answer
example.
some questions, though. So give
Here's
us
an
the
example. Here's an example that comes up in California. If you have a named peril policy, vehicle is one of the perils. So when a car hits your house, when I did hundreds and hundreds of claims of cars hitting houses, okay, I did a lot of claims of cars hitting liquor stores and cars hitting churches. Go figure. In both cases, the person is looking for spirit. But I did so many cars launched into liquor stores. A lot of times people they're diabetics and they need their alcohol, and they confuse the gas and the brake, and they launch the vehicle inside the. One of the best photographs I ever took was a lady who launched her car inside the liquor store, and then they tear out all the gondolas, and so that everything is the chips and everything are scattered everywhere. And then the LA County Sheriff was there with his green uniform, and the sheriff was looking at the husband and the sheriff were like looking at each other, and you could just tell they weren't saying anything, but they were like, "Oh shit, what did my wife do?" But
that happens.
So I did so many claims like that, and so the thing is that on the California Fair Plan, which is named peril, you could have a situation where the neighbor's building some kind of giant mansion, so they have this heavy earth moving equipment, and it's shaking the earth really hard, and the drywall and the plaster in the house is cracking from the neighbor doing all this construction. So on the California Fair Plan, you could say, hey, I got damage from the peril of vehicle, the efficient proximate cause of the vehicle.
Because the heavy equipment is a vehicle.
Right. Now, on a homeowner policy,
that is interesting.
They would say, well, the vehicle caused earth movement. And the earth movement is excluded, and it's excluded with anti-concurrent causation language. So if the earth movement is anywhere in the chain of events, you're just a dead duck. So now here's where my knowledge, I don't know exactly, but
so the lack of the exclusions actually benefits the named peril policy owners.
Yes, and
that's very interesting.
Everybody disses the named peril policy like, oh, that's a crap policy. Well, guess what? If you have a bunch of antiques and they burn up in a fire, you're going to get paid better on a named peril policy than you will on a HO3. Because on a HO3, they might give you functional value.
Right. That's a good point.
Another one, too. There's another one,
simpler policies. I mean, that's...
If let's say you're a retired Navy SEAL and you like sleeping outdoors anyway because of your PTSD, and you own a home in Malibu on the beach. Maybe you're like some rich guy because you did security in Afghanistan for private companies. So you buy this multi-million-dollar property in Malibu, and then you have a fire in the house, and you decide you're going to sleep in the backyard, right?
Right.
Well, what if your rent is $10,000 a month? Easy, right? On the beach in Malibu with the waves lulling you to sleep.
Sure.
Easily, probably $10,000 a week or more in the summertime. Could be $20,000 a week. So if you buy, you might need to buy extra fair rental value coverage. But you could be paid, $30,000 a month, and you're sleeping in the backyard. And you can tell the adjuster, "Hey, I'm sleeping in the backyard. I don't have a hotel." You don't have to incur the expense. It's not ALE. It's fair rental value. And so in some cases, people can be compensated really well and not even have an expense. It's totally legal, totally ethical, totally contractual, fair rental value on a named peril policy. So it's wrong. It's wrong to say that a named peril policy will not pay as well as a homeowner policy. It depends. If you have a water leak or a theft of property, then you're going to be screwed with a named peril policy, because the named peril policy does not cover theft of personal property. And then the theft is one of the named perils, but that's for building damage. So when somebody's like steals your windows, what they used to do is they say, well, we won't pay for the window.
Glass breakage is normally part of a named peril policy, but so what if they break a pane during the theft?
Okay.
And is there a parent set deal in those policies?
No. On a named peril policy, I'm trying to remember, they exclude glass breakage. Maybe on some they pay, but on the ones I used to do, they would exclude glass. So, okay, let's talk about, I'm trying to remember now, because it's been like 10 years.
What we absolutely have to answer some questions.
Let's
field some questions.
These poor people. All right, I'm going to go in order, guys. I know there's a lot, so hang in there.
Conrad.
All right, Conrad Phillips. Conrad was at my class last week.
Okay, what state is it? Okay, you guys got to always say the state. Okay, please. You got to think state. Okay, these questions don't make sense unless you tell us the state. Now, even if you tell me the state, I won't necessarily know your state rules, but you got to pay attention to the state.
That's true. So State Farm one claim, full roof replacement has been approved. The decking is not up to code. Less than 7/16 thick, greater than quarter-inch spacing, no H clips, no stamps are present. State Farm has paid for code upgrades such as ice and water and drip edge, but says that they did not owe to bring the decking up to code. Policy is RCV.
Okay, why wouldn't they owe to bring it up to code? If they, especially okay, really, Matthew, this is a question better for you. Okay,
they obviously owe to bring it up to code because they have manufacturer installation guidelines, and it's the manufacturer's installation guidelines that have most of those issues that you just pointed out. The spacing between the decking, the lack of H clips. The H clips and the spacing might actually be in a chart under, depending on what your building code is. If it's IRC, IBC, then it's going to actually be under flooring. But you'll have a chart that says what the minimum thickness is that's required and whether or not an H clip is required. But the spacing between the decking, that's going to be specific to the manufacturer installation guidelines of possibly the shingles. Because imagine if you're nailing a shingle to the decking and the nail actually goes through that gap. That's why they all have a maximum gap of 1/8 inch. It's not going to work out. So they absolutely have to.
Wait, Matt, is Conrad's a contractor, if I can remember correctly. Is that or is he a public adjuster?
I believe he's a contractor.
Get it to a PA right now. Seriously, because that's BS. I mean, that I can't believe State Farm is trying to use that argument. Just throwing it out there. Okay, it needs to go up to the next level. Yeah. Do you agree, Matt, on that?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely.
Does everybody here agree that is not accurate?
Correct. Okay. And here's why. Okay. It doesn't meet building code to nail to the space decking. It doesn't meet manufacturers. What do you want to call them, Matthew? Like manufacturer
installation guidelines, requirements.
Okay. Whatever. And it probably doesn't meet code. Also, because it doesn't meet because the code has to generally respects the manufacturer's guidelines. The other thing is, let's just say hypothetically you didn't even have any code upgrade coverage. You can argue that it's not trade standard to do that. So, see, one of the things people forget about. Okay,
I don't think it would need to be a code upgrade coverage at all. To be honest, the shingles exist, the decking exists, everything's already on the roof.
Right.
So it's part of a standard repair. It's reasonable and necessary items.
Exactly. But see, the thing is, your fallback position can be the code requirement. So people get mad at me because they say, why are you saying it's paid under the code upgrade coverage? Well, like Mao, the dictator of China, he's, when they realized that their country was so poor because they didn't have any entrepreneurial activity, he decided to relax the communism a little bit and let people do free enterprise. And he said, well, I don't care if the cat is white or the cat is black, as long as it catches rats. And so, like, my attitude is, like, I don't really care how you get it covered as long as you get it covered. Now, if you come to me and say, like, look, we're not rebuilding the house. Like, Mr. Public Adjuster, I want to tell you a secret.
For all my arguments going forward, I want to bring in a communist murdering dictator in as an example for it. in some possible way.
Here's the point. Okay, here's the point, right? So are you trying to satisfy your own ego about how smart you are? You're trying to get the money. Okay, and see,
Right.
the homeowner might be entitled to the money more than one way, and maybe one way that you get the money is a really good argument, and it's legal, and it's the perfect argument, and it's the argument that they should respect, and it's the argument that you feel so proud about because you're smart about it because you learned it in Matthew Mahon's class. Okay, great. But what if that argument doesn't work? Then you go to plan B, and you use the other argument that you don't believe in as much, but it's also true. Use the other argument that has more hoops to jump through because you have to actually have to do the work, but you get it paid. You know, the goal
Absolutely.
is to get it paid. It's not to be right. It's to get it paid. So what I would say is, you know, you got to think about you see, these questions are different depending on who's asking, because if I'm the public adjuster, it's my job to get the homeowner the money that they're entitled to. If I'm a contractor, I'm trying to do the work. Those are different objectives. They're related, but they're different.
For that particular example,
Right.
we're talking about whether or not there's coverage, either through ordinance and law coverage. Since it's in, I'm going to assume that they had
Okay, but
ordinance
see,
and law
why does-
based on the other things that they paid for. And if they have that, as long as you're not hitting that limit, and there are limits, so you got to make sure you're not going to hit those limits. But if you're not hitting the limit, it's an easier argument to argue that it should fall under ordinance and law. And like Leland said, get it paid. Fight for the under ordinance law. If you don't have ordinance and law, there's still coverage though.
Why is the
And it's still
contractor
a-
asking if it's covered? Why is the public adjuster asking if it's covered? Well, the public adjuster should be asking if it's covered because he's trying to get the money for his client. The contractor is asking if it's covered because he wants to know that there's going to be money that his homeowner is going to get so his homeowner could pay him, because the contractor wants to do the work. It's like, for me as a public adjuster, I don't necessarily care whether the homeowner repairs their house. It's not really necessarily in my business. If the homeowner says, look, this is a piece of shit house we inherited from grandma, and we were planning on selling it anyway, and we don't want to fix it, but we want to get every penny we're entitled to under the policy, then I'm going to go to the insurance company and say, you guys got to pay for this decking because you can't nail to it. It's not trade standards. No decent roofer will do it. And
No
then
matter
the
what,
adjuster
they
tells
owe
me,
for a proper repair, and
Right,
it
and
has
then
to be
the
done
adjuster-
properly.
the adjuster tells me, oh, it's a code upgrade, and don't worry about it. Just repair the roof and then turn in the receipt and we'll pay it later. I'm like, no, we want you to pay it up front. We're not doing a code upgrade claim. Forget it. Why should we have to do a code upgrade claim? You owe it whether or not there's code upgrade coverage. Right?
See,
Right.
Leland, that was my question, because I believe Conrad said that they paid for drip edge and some other items, but not pay for the decking. We all know, and I'm assuming it's in Georgia, but you got to do costs incurred for code upgrades to be paid per the policy. So did they already replace that decking? And then they're saying, oh, by the way, we're not going to pay for that. Does that make sense?
A lot of contractors say they paid for this, but they didn't actually send any funds out yet. They might have put it in the estimate or
Understood.
something. So
Understood.
who knows?
So
Well,
you
we-
got to really think, okay, so you got
Yeah.
to really think about the strategy. Let's say that you got a homeowner that is street smart, that trusts you as a contractor, and they want their roof done perfect, okay? And let's say that the policy has code upgrade coverage, and let's say that the policy requires, or the adjuster is inventing a requirement that the work be completed and paid for. Okay,
Right.
well, that's a different scenario than the person down the street. But if that's your scenario as a contractor, what you might do is first demand the money under the regular coverage, or have the homeowner do that technically, that you got
at least get the ACV for it, and
you
then
got to pay me. You got to pay me for it because I can't nail to the space decking. And then if that
Right.
doesn't work, your plan B is to do the code upgrade demand, which is going to work in this case because you are actually doing the work. So there's nothing to really be afraid of. In fact, here's where the strategy comes in. Then you get your homeowner, which likes you and trusts you, and they believe in you, and you tell them, look, Mr. Homeowner, the roof is 30 grand, but the code upgrade part is 5. I want you to write me a check for 5. Why don't you
That way
pay me for the, and then you turn that into the insurance company and say, hey, you got to reimburse me. Okay, but you wouldn't do that strategy. I wouldn't do that strategy with another homeowner that just wants to cash out.
Well, I mean, it depends on the language of the policy too. If you've got the
Right.
word incurred versus the word spent in the policy, if it says that they will pay for ordinance and law items only when you have, when the cost has been spent, then you'd have, it's a reimbursement policy. Otherwise, it's
Yeah.
not a reimbursement policy.
Well,
You just
okay,
need to
what if
prove
it
that
says
that has been
incur?
incurred.
Hey,
What if
let's
it
go to
says
the
incur?
next question though.
Yeah,
I want to
we-
hit on. I want to see the next question and
Okay,
see
so
if we
that's
all
the next
have the
question.
same answer. It was. Yeah, this is it right
Yeah.
here. I know what my
Delegates.
answer is. I want to see what your guys' is to see if we're on the
Question
same
is,
page.
proof of loss is submitted for $191,000. Carrier says our research found the reasonable replacement cost for the claim is $142,733. What policy basis could be used in this case?
You guys
Appraisal.
know it is so simple. It's right there.
It's appraisal. So appraisal was
Yes.
built into the policies for the insurance carrier's protection originally. If you're submitting a proof of loss and this is how much you're saying it is, if they disagree with that amount,
Okay, I wouldn't do it that way. But see, I'm different. So what you're telling me is like, okay, Leland, you've got this 22 revolver with only 2 rounds in it, and a really big bad guy is breaking down your front door. So why don't you just shoot him as soon as you see him inside your house? Well, a 22 doesn't stop a lot of people. Just because I have a weapon doesn't mean I need to use it right away. Maybe what I should do is maybe I should hide in the closet and wait for the police to come. And if the guy comes into my bedroom upstairs, I might pop him in the face at short range. So just because I have a weapon doesn't mean I need to use it right away. This is like chess.
So what would you do? What portion of the policy would you use?
Well, I'm not saying I wouldn't go to appraisal.
Okay.
But
Just making sure.
But wait.
Violence inside of Leland, none of us really know about.
We're just trying to go to appraisal and do this $50,000 dispute.
No. See, this is something I really feel strongly about. It's the same as playing chess. Okay, beginning chess players, they learn that the queen is really powerful, can move in any direction and kill anybody. So they get excited. They want to start moving their queen right away. And that's how they lose, because they're not moving their pawns to control the center of the board. They're not developing their other pieces.
I mean, you have a solid. So from the information that we have here, it sounds like they're not disputing items or coverage.
Right. So you have $191,000 proof of loss. Okay. Does that include doorstops? Does that include T-moldings at the end of the thing? Does it include detaching the water line on the refrigerator? Because I would hammer the shit out of the insurance company saying, you've done your Xactimate estimate, but you left off the refrigerator ice maker line, and you didn't measure the crown molding on top of the cabinets correctly. Here's a tape measure photo, and you left out the detaching the doorstops from the baseboards. Where's the money for that $12 item? I want that $12, and I want it now. Okay, and I might even hammer them on one item. And then what happens is when they send me a check for some more money, now what happens there? I have more money.
I mean, if there really was a distinction between the line items, then you definitely have something to work with there.
There always is.
You could just pop him in the face, though.
If it's the same scope, the answer is appraisal.
All sideways.
It's the same scope. Hey, Rod, to answer your question, I'm gonna give a shout out to Rod. Rod's a 357 Magnum type guy, so he's not a 22 guy. He hunts in Texas.
You only have the weapons that you're given, okay? And appraisal is not the greatest weapon. It's a powerful weapon, but come on, guys.
It's risky. It's risky. I mean, you can use it as a rule of thumb and just say that you're going to get halfway between.
This is a bid comparison letter. I just pulled it out of the trash. It's one of my drafts, right? Okay. Okay, wait. This is a $5,000 difference. Okay. Now look at how many pages it is. 1, 2. I got photographs and stuff. 3, 4, 5. It's like I wrote like a 7-page letter on a $5,000 difference. Okay.
You should have been a defense attorney, get paid per hour on that, man.
But the
you
thing is,
missed your calling.
I'm taking care of my
putting
customer.
in the trash the mic drop.
Why would I give this to appraisal so the homeowner has to pay money? And then my appraisers have to do all this work for $150 or $200 an hour, right?
Yeah.
So look, the first thing I do is in the beginning of the letter, I put here, you're violating the California law by not paying our estimate. Okay, so they sent over some contractor to do a comparative bid. Okay, and so I said the classic restoration doesn't include final cleanup for the entire home. Okay, and so there's like a $500 difference. Our estimate includes 6 hours of supervision, and I go into a long explanation about why Xactimate supervision is more than just direct.
You just brought up an interesting question in my head. I'm going to ask Remington.
Hold on for a second, because please, I'm going to get off track.
No way I'm going to remember. Go ahead.
And I talk about trade standards and how the Contractor State License Board of California requires supervision. And then I say, you've got a threshold in here. They estimated 1 linear foot of detaching and resetting a threshold that overlaps the floor, which, by the way, they got that line item from my estimate. Okay. And so they put $14. And then I put the entry door as a standard 3-foot door, and it's correctly estimated at $43 because it's 3 feet, not 1 foot. They made a clerical error. So the thing is, you look at this and you think, this is crazy, like $2 here, $5 there. But guess what? It adds up to be $5,000. So
Not only that, you just prove that their estimate is wrong.
Right.
So you
So
poke
as
a
a
hole
business
in.
person,
Yeah.
if I'm charging 10%, okay, then as a business person, I'm making $500, right? But also it's not just about the money. It's about taking care of the customer. So can I make $500 doing this? Now, I need to delegate these bid comparisons to a third party because they're just boring and frustrating and depressing. And it's too time consuming. But, you know, I've had situations where after long negotiation and comparative bids that the insurance company got where they paid me like an extra 30 grand on a fire loss, I still did an 11-page letter where I got another 30,000 for knick-knack little items. Now, why would I want my appraiser to do all that? Because even if I have to go to appraisal, wouldn't it be better to get money first the easy way, the low-hanging fruit? And it wouldn't be better for me to hand the work to the appraiser already done. Okay. And so I think people they think, oh, I've got this powerful appraisal gun, bang, bang. You know, well, sometimes you don't need to show your gun. Sometimes you need to put your gun in your pocket and not let the opponent know that you have it.
I agree. It matters what's
With the safety
delta,
on.
right? The delta is going to take a lot of that into consideration if you should go to appraisal or not. I think everybody has their own threshold. But if it's $50,000 and you're going to pay an appraiser and potentially an umpire, what, $5,000 to get that 50K, I think it's worth rolling the dice. But that's just me. Everybody has their own opinion on that.
Well, I'll probably get this 5,000. I'll probably get this money.
Yeah,
There's
but I'm
only a
talking about
$5,000
$50,000.
delta going to an appraiser. Sometimes it
Right.
isn't going to be worth it. By the time you pay the appraiser and possibly even half of the umpire's fees,
But see, think
you're
about this.
splitting the
Okay?
baby.
Think about this, Matthew. Let's say you go to a loss and you're looking at it carefully, and the homeowner's explaining to you where they bought their flooring and how nice it is, and it's a pecan floor, and they found it at the special store, and you got all this information that you've seen firsthand, right?
Mhm.
Okay, and then you hand it off to an appraiser. An appraiser doesn't have a feel for the claim. He doesn't understand all those nuances. And so when you write a demand letter and you say, look, this is a pecan floor, and it's a high grade floor because there's very few knots in the pecan. And here's 3 suppliers that sell this. One of them is in Arkansas and one of them is in Tennessee.
Sure.
And this is how much it costs, you know, blah, blah, blah. Now you're doing all this work and it's a pain in the ass to do all that work. But see, you know the claim. You met the homeowner. You've seen the house. And so it's a lot easier for you to put that together. And then if you give it to an appraiser, they're not up to speed and they
I'm
don't
with you on this.
understand it. Here's another
I'm
thing
actually
too.
with you because honestly, if you're doing your job as a public adjuster, you're going to be making the proper fight, providing all the documentation and things with the assumption that you've already submitted all that with that proof of loss.
Okay, and
I mean, I would
there's
hand
more.
my proof
I
of
gotta
loss
say more.
over
I
to
gotta
the
say
appraiser
so
if
much
I
on the
had to.
subject. There's another thing too, is when you submit that and you say, here's 3 suppliers of the pecan flooring. Okay, now if the insurance company pays it, you win. If they don't pay it, then later on, if you have to bring in an attorney, right? The attorney's going to say, why the hell didn't you pay this? Because we gave you names of 3 suppliers and you never even called them or researched it. Like, what the hell's going on? So you can make the bad faith more obvious by asking for something, even if you know they're going to say no, right?
Absolutely.
And then the other thing too, here's another benefit. Day one, when you hand the package off to your appraiser can easily understand the loss. And they can say, oh, they had a pecan flooring. The pecan flooring is $10 a square foot. The insurance company only paid $5, right? And then here's like sub bids from local contractors. And so your appraiser understands the loss. Not that you make it, it's important that you make it easy for the appraiser to understand it. But what's another issue here is that the appraiser can understand it right away. And that way the appraiser has an advantage over the opposing appraiser because they're already up to speed on day one. And they can start talking to the opposing appraiser and the opposing umpire like, hey, do you realize it's pecan flooring? And do you realize that they had a sub-zero refrigerator? And do you realize that it was a level 5 plaster finish? Imagine if they're telling that shit to the other appraiser on day one because they're already brought up to speed, right?
Sure.
That's much better than if your appraiser is figuring this out over a 1 month period. And they're calling the other appraiser like a month later saying, by the way, I just found out that the wall finish was a level 5, finish.
You should obviously, anytime you go to an appraisal, you should give the information that you've been able to gather thus far to them, everything that you could possibly get. If you haven't done a full investigation yourself to uncover a lot of that stuff, you haven't really done your job anyway.
So that's what I'm saying. So stop pulling the trigger for appraisal before
Sure.
you've done your bid comparison and demanded that money. And the thing is, you always, okay, so Mr. Huggins can talk about this. My opinion, you always want to ask for stuff because you always win by asking, because there's like 3 responses the insurance company can do. They can ignore you, which becomes evidence of bad faith. But they're not ignoring you if you don't ask in the first place. You got to ask them in order to get them to ignore you. So they can ignore you, they can say no, or they can say yes. No matter what, you're going to win. Because if they ignore you, it creates bad faith for Mr. Huggins to argue about. If they say yes, you get paid, and it's one less thing to appraise. If they say no, they have to give a basis for saying no, and they have to explain why they're saying no. So, for example, if they say no and they say, oh, Home Depot has that, or Xactimate says that floor is average grade, so it's only $5. Well, that's a no that you can defeat, either in appraisal or in court. So make them stake out their position. In California, there's a requirement that if they send a denial letter, they have to quote the policy, the facts, the case law. The adjusters are required to quote case law if it's relevant in the denial letter.
Really?
Yes, they have to spell out their position. See, this
Case law.
Yeah, because think about it. How bullshit is it for the insurance company to say, well, we're not covering that? Well, why not? Well, because we're not. Well, why not? Well, because we don't think it's reasonable. Well, why don't you think it's reasonable? Because we don't. I mean, that's not fair to the homeowner. They got to stake out their position. And the thing, too, is if you have, regardless of what state you're in, if they say, like, well, we think your floor is average, then you ask them, like, well, why do you think pecan flooring is average? Or why do you think my bids are wrong?
Sure.
Or here's the one, too, is where can I buy that? You tell me where I can buy that. So then
I'm going to pull up the next question.
Okay, let's do the next question.
We've got 4 minutes left.
So, I'm sorry.
We're on question 2. Carrier pays insured for damages under a covered peril. Contractor installs already damaged flooring materials, gets paint on the wallpaper while painting the ceiling, and insurance consent mitigation company, co-sent insurance. Did they mean to say co-sent? Insurance consent mitigation company loses a bunch of contents.
Insurance company
there you go. Insurance company sent a mitigation company who lost a bunch of the contents. Is the insurance company required to identify the insured and have the work properly repaired?
Okay.
Then subrogate.
So here's my attitude on this. This comes up all the time where preferred vendors do a bad job. Also, too, the homeowner might hire like some chuck in a truck or a guy from a Home Depot parking lot. So sometimes the evidence of what you actually spent is evidence of what the work should cost. But what if the money that you spent was on an unlicensed, uninsured contractor that did a bad job and it wasn't to workmanlike standards, and they didn't have a contractor's license? So how do you quantify that? I think that the insurance company owes you what a licensed, bonded, insured general contractor would charge to do the work properly, to workmanlike standards, legally, right? That's what the California contractor's license law says. That's trade standard. That's what they owe you. So if it was done below standard, they can't use that below standard cost, especially if they were underpaying the insured in the first place. The insured used a bad contractor. In this case, but guess what? Your negotiating position is weak, because if you already did the work, the insurance company is going to try to say, well, what did you spend? That's what we're going to pay you. In this case, there's another element here. The insurance company sent the bad contractor. Now, attorneys always, like this idea of like trying to make the insurance company responsible for the acts of their contractors, but they've all told me, in California at least, that it's so impossible to make that stick. But I have cases all the time where the attorneys are raising issues like, hey, you guys are in cahoots with this contractor, and you do it because you save money that way. So you're legally responsible for the bad work that the contractor did. And you'd be surprised how many times we find out that the contractor doesn't even have a license. And then the thing, too, is the homeowner can report the contractor to the Contractor State License Board, and the Contractor State License Board has an army of contractors that moonlight to help out as experts, and they'll come in and they'll say, this is a crappy work. And then the contractor will get written up and fined for, here's what they get fined for: excessive down payment, not having the contract in dollars and cents, not working to trade standards, abandonment of job. These are all the standard things and you can see it on the website that these contractors got busted for it. So if you have a contractor sent by the insurance company, you might be able to contact your contractor state license board if you have a one that's proactive for consumers, and they'll do an investigation of the work, and they'll say the work was shitty and it was below trade standards. And they might even put a dollar amount on what it costs to fix it. Now, the problem is that, and this is something Mr. Huggins can speak to, is that the insurance policy doesn't necessarily cover that within the 4 corners of the document. But you can make an argument that it's an extra contractual liability. You can say, you guys sent a shitty contractor. In fact, they weren't licensed. That happens sometimes. and you should have known that your contractor wasn't licensed, and they did a bad job because you underpaid the claim. So therefore, okay, fine, maybe it's not technically owed under the policy, but we're suing you because you're liable for it because you were negligent.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, in the Unfair Claims Settlement Practices Act that most states have adopted, number 14, I want to say, says that the carrier has to have some kind of measures in place to verify the workmanlike manner of a carrier-owned contractor. So if they are the ones hiring them,
I haven't seen that rule. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's in there. So if they are the ones that
I'd argue that
that's the key, is trying to find out who hired who. Was it just a referral, or was the carrier the one that actually sent them out? So if there is a work authorization form, that's not the same thing as a contract.
Okay. I got a case right now that's in litigation, or going to be in litigation, where the carrier said, use our preferred vendor and we guarantee their work. And then the homeowner saying, well, the work was bad, I want you to refund the money. And the carrier is now saying, it's true that we recommended that vendor, and it's true that we told you the work would be guaranteed. But once you hired them, we no longer guarantee it. They're actually saying that.
That doesn't even make sense.
Is that do you have like a wall phone? Is that like a...
No, it's my wife calling me.
Is that what your cell phone does? Is that ring?
Oh, it's like an old school ring. Yeah, because I'm an old school kind of guy.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it wasn't like a house phone. Like
one of those circle dial phones.
So the thing is, what you
Jessica says you're a Texan at heart, Leland.
Oh, yes, I really am a Texan at heart. I love Texas. And I had okay, get this. So in California, we talk about in escrow. In Texas, you say under contract. I love the whole Texas language. So in California, you have a flatbed tow truck that carrying drywall that backs into a laundromat. In Texas, you have a rollaway wrecker carrying sheetrock that backs into a washateria. So same country, but totally actually they're a separate country. You know, Texas is the only state that was a separate country for a while. And in Texas, you can find the French embassy. France had an embassy in Texas, and also in Paris, there's a Texas embassy. So I love Texas. I love the culture. I love the people. So after Hurricane Katrina, I was going to buy 3 houses on a lot in the Texas Hill Country for $113,000. 3 houses on a lot. So that just kind of shows you how long ago that was. But that'd probably be like a multi-million-dollar property now. But my wife didn't want to sell our house in California. And, you know, California is not the greatest place in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of claims here. And that's the thing is, so, you know, I have so much business here. If you fly into LAX and you look out and you're flying for hours over houses after houses after houses. So there's just so many claims here. So I really wanted to move to Texas. I really did.
Texas is actually a very interesting state. There's quite a bit there that's in the policyholders' benefit. And I got
and there's big hail.
It's a business-friendly state.
Big hail.
And the people are honest, you know, and it's just good for business. I love that state. And I think Texas should succeed. Okay, everyone says like, oh, California, all these liberal Californians are leaving to other states and ruining it. Well, you know, remember, we elected Reagan. So a lot of the people that are leaving California are people that are probably more conservative than Texans already. Certainly if they're going to Austin.
That might be true.
So
I think that we actually got through all the questions. Everybody else is just commenting on the questions, and
there's got to be another
Jessica
question.
Is all about Texas. Are you from Texas, Jessica? You must be.
Yeah.
I would assume so.
Texas is going to save this country by separating.
Well, that's a whole nother ball of wax.
That's a different podcast.
That's a whole other ball of wax there. We're talking about policy coverage, right?
Yeah.
Well, what's next? See, that'll be really interesting if Texas succeeds, because then will non-Texans be allowed to enter Texas and vice versa? And how would you do like all the...
Will they have the standard fire policy? We have all types of questions that we don't know.
Yeah, that's...
How much money will Texas... How much money will the federal government make Texas pay to leave?
That's interesting. There's a lot of taxpayer dollars coming out of Texas, so maybe they don't really want them to. Who knows?
Man, I'm surprised we got through all the questions. Yeah, I'm surprised we got through all the questions. That We made
All
it
right, now
happen.
we just had one more come through. Let's call this the last question, and then we'll call it quits.
Whoop,
So
whoop.
Bart,
You got to answer this
Topic.
one. You got to answer this one, Matthew, because it's about metal exclusion. We don't have metal exclusion in California. We don't have hail in California, by the way.
Carrie denied gutter guards because of metal exclusion covered detach and reset of gutter guards. After roof was done, gutter guards did not work as before. How should we get the carrier to pay for it? Well, if the metal exclusion generally would be a functional damage kind of an exclusion. If that's what it is and they aren't functioning, it seems like a simple enough response. This is
Is he
what
talking
happened
about a
during the
cosmetic
detach and reset.
exclusion? Is he talking about a cosmetic exclusion?
I would assume so. So metal exclusions that I've seen, metal roofing components, it's all a cosmetic damage exclusion to metal roofing materials, metal roofing components, metal in general. So if that's what it is, I assume that's what he's saying, and that's what it's going to be. Obviously, it's clearly functionally damaged if it's not actually functioning.
Can
And
I
he's
say
saying
something
yes.
about this? Okay, first of all, you got to think like a public adjuster. Okay, when the baseboard is wet, here's a problem everybody has. They fixate. People fixate on so many things, like yes or no, is this a code upgrade, issue? And sometimes they fixate on something, and so then they lose sight of all the other arguments they could be making. So as a public adjuster, I always try to think of like 7 reasons why the baseboard has to be removed and replaced. So bear with me. I'll relate this back to the gutters. But when you have a wet baseboard, I'm going to argue that, if it's true, it's swollen. It has to be replaced because it's swollen. It has to be replaced because it's lost structural integrity, which is related, it's not holding a nail as well, which is related to being swollen, but it's slightly different. So that's another issue. The third one is it's stained. The fourth one is it smells. The fifth one is it has bacteria because it's category 3 water. The sixth reason is we have to remove it to dry behind it, which a lot of insurance code specifies that they have to pay for stuff like that. Like even if it's not damaged, you got to pay to remove it to get to something that is damaged. And then the seventh reason is we already removed another baseboard for good reason, and we can't match this one, so we have to remove it. So you could have 7 potentially solid reasons why that baseboard needs to be removed. Now, what most people do is they just look at it really simplistically, like, hey, it's damaged, I got to remove it. But you got to think like a neurotic lawyer and come up with 7, because the reason is, think about it. If the adjuster goes, oh, well, that could be dried. Okay, but what about the bacteria? Or that could be dried. Well, what about the stain? Okay, well, the stain could be painted. Well, what about the fact I got to take it off to dry behind it? So the thing is, and maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit. Maybe those 7 reasons aren't so great. Maybe only 5 of those are really good. But the thing is, you got to stop and instead of looking at the gutter and say, this is so unfair and I'm so emotional. I should be able to get paid for this gutter. This is crazy. Why are they treating me this way? You got to step back and say, what arguments can I make? What solid arguments can I make? So, for example, does that gutter need to be detached because you have to paint the fascia? And sometimes if you step back and you calm down, you say, you know what? We have to paint the fascia for this other reason. So forget about arguing about, whether it has cosmetic damage or not. Pay me for this other reason. And then the insurance company
they did agree to detach them. So I would assume that there was some coverage for some reason. They agreed to detach. They just didn't agree to replace them yet because of the metal exclusion. Maybe it had dents in it. I don't know. But now they're not working. So it is a functional damage argument suddenly anyway.
Okay, but remember, on all metal cosmetic things, the standard thing is you get that microscopic camera and you show how there's fractures in the coating from the manufacturer.
That only works on the kind of coatings I have. So if it's aluminum, you're not going to have a coating that resists rusts in it. So the magnification is not going to work on like an aluminum gutter system.
Okay, well, what arguments would you bring? Think of some. Give me 3 different arguments why they have to pay for it.
Well, the way gutter guards work, the water has to actually go across it a certain way, and especially if it's a helmet style, it has to curl back under. So it's using surface tension to move the water into the place that it's supposed to be. If there's indentations in it, the water is not going to flow the way it's supposed to. You're going to get water near the foundation. You're going to end up having issues. So I would argue that for gutter guards especially, dents could be considered functional damage.
Okay. Give me another argument.
Maybe they will not prevent debris from entering the gutters as well as they used to. So you have a reduction of functionality for debris
Okay, what about
keeping
this?
outing.
What if you have to detach them for whatever reason, and that's covered, and then it's the kind of thing that you can't really reinstall well because
Maybe it's got corners or something, and you need like 10
Yeah.
people to detach it all at the same time from a scaffolding system
And-
that they didn't pay for.
And per his fact pattern, I'm pretty sure it said that they paid for detach and reset. But I think during the detach and reset, the gutters were damaged and there's a metal exclusion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I
was
remember
a-
something of that.
It was an ice backup, ice damming situation, apparently.
Okay.
So that's why they're
Okay,
detached.
so here's a, you know, I always think in analogies. I'm sorry about that, but like imagine if you have a shower, you build a tile shower, and then you cut the glass. You know, the people have that nice big plate glass shower door.
Mhm.
The glass is cut to fit the shower, and then it's tempered. You drill a hole in it for the handle, and you temper it after you cut it. But you cut it after you build the shower,
Okay.
not before. So if you have a shower and you detach the shower door, can you reinstall that same shower door on a new tile shower that has slightly different dimensions? It's not that easy to do because it was done in a certain order. First, it was tiled, which set the size of the opening.
Sure.
And then the glass was custom made to fit that opening. So now you have this custom made piece of glass that you're going to try to put into. So the insurance company could say, well, you know, just have your tile setter be really careful to reverse engineer it and make the size equal to the door that's on site.
But if
And then
all
you
your
can-
tiles were uncut and they were put in place, you'd have to have exact dimensions of the tile, the exact same width of the grout. That would be very, very difficult to do. You're right. It would be slightly off.
Sometimes you can make the argument, and this is kind of a hard argument to make. It's kind of hard to convince people, and you know, sometimes it could be true, but people don't really understand it. You could say, look, when the gutters are installed, they put this piece and then they attach the second piece to the first piece and the third piece to the fourth piece, you know, so it's all made. So you start taking it all off and throwing it on the lawn. How am I going to put it back together? You know, and you know, sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not, but you can try to make that argument.
I think that there's a good argument to be said to make it a more costly repair than a replacement. Just because in order to pull it down carefully, you're going to have a lot of workers present, and they're going to have to be standing on something.
What are you going to do? Label each piece? You know, it's like if you're J. Paul Getty and you have this mansion in France and you want to make it your home in California. So they disassemble every stone and like an archaeology thing where they mark each stone and then they transport it on a boat to California and they reassemble it. You know, that's a lot of work. It's more work than building in the first place. So, you know, like if you take these gutters down, like I'm just guessing. I've never done this before, but like, do you have to label each piece in order and lay it out on the lawn in careful order so you can reassemble
I don't
it?
actually think you would have to do that, but you are going, if they are fastened with fasteners, you would have to. If the gutter guard itself is mechanically fastened to the gutter system, in order to make sure that your holes line up again, it would have to be labeled in what order it is. Otherwise, you're going to leave holes behind because they're not going to line up quite right. So, no, you have a good point there. Now that I'm thinking about it.
This brings up another thing that is so common that people overlook is third-party experts. So, if you're a roofer and the local auto body shop is telling people like this guy's a really good roofer, people are going to believe the body shop guy. And if you're a roofer and you go around and tell people if you want your car fixed on, go to this body shop guy. Why? Because nobody believes the roofer when the roofer says he's a good roofer. And nobody believes the auto body guy when he says he's a good auto body guy. But everyone believes the auto body guy when he says the roofer is good and vice versa. Now, what if the person doing the recommendation or giving the opinion is an expert? Like what if they have a degree or they're a lawyer or they, you know, engineer? Now that's even more powerful. So this is what insurance companies do. They're always getting experts, good ones, bad ones, highly educated ones that are not so highly educated, but they're always using experts. And what I find kind of bad is that people don't on the insured on the contracting side or the public adjusting side, they're not using experts. It doesn't have to be a rocket scientist, but you could get a gutter company. Even if you like to do your own gutters as a roofing, you could get a gutter. Now, see, this is where cultivating relationships come in. Because if you're doing your own gutters, you're probably not giving the job to the gutter company. So maybe you should give a couple of jobs to the gutter company, or maybe you should help them with some referrals or something to jobs that you're not working on. So you have a relationship with another human being. And then you can call them and say, hey, can you give me an opinion that these gutters can't be detached and reset? Now, when you send that to the insurance company, what are they going to do? They don't even have a gutter company to talk to because the insurance company cultivates relationships with contractors that will do comparative bids and say that your bid is too high. But they don't have relationships with gutter companies because they don't drill down that deep. So if you have a relationship with a gutter company and they say like, well, we can do it, but we have to charge a lot extra, or we're not going to do it because we won't warranty it, then you're throwing the ball back hard in the insurance company's court. What are they going to do? They might just pay it.
They might, or they might just say no because they want to act in bad faith or whatever.
Okay,
I
but
love
remember-
Jessica's language
But
here.
remember what we said about appraisal. Now that you've gotten this gutter expert, your claim is set up for appraisal better because
Well, it
appraisal-
depends on the claim. In Georgia, we've got bad case law, so going to appraisal is very, very difficult. But that's everything's
It is.
state by state. We already mentioned
Right.
it. I love this
Agreed.
language. Leland, what do you think about instead of saying a reduction of functionality, you said degraded capability? Would that make a difference? Is there different? Does that semantic make a
Okay,
difference?
I think it has the same meaning, but when you, if in sales, there's a thing called a pattern interrupt. So if instead of using the normal language that the other person is expecting, you use some other language, you kind of get their attention a little bit because so you would get the opposing party's attention by using different language, but I think it means the same thing.
Pattern interrupt.
I think it does too.
Yeah, because see, people learn to ignore. For example, imagine the adjuster is hearing all day long, some argument over and over and over from the contractors. And so when you say the same argument, they're like, okay, whatever, I heard that before. But when you use a different language, you make them listen a little bit better.
Right.
Yeah, I've been teaching something like this for a while, but I didn't have the terminology for it. I'm going to look that up. That's great. Anything that you can do to just to make it different from what everything else is will make them get it out of their head where they know exactly what to do and make them think it through. And then you have somebody suddenly that is going to think about things logically again, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I use the word Hague uses in the Finn combing white paper. Is that what Hague uses? Degraded capability?
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, but see, I think functionality is probably more of a correct word. But you know what? Well, remember something too. A lot of people
Utility. There's a lot of terms.
people try to sound smart by using other words.
I would have assumed that they would say efficiency, degraded efficiency or something along those lines. But then they're trying to say that something isn't functionally damaged by saying that it hasn't had a significant or a negligible, I want to say negligible change in efficiency or something along those lines. Those schmucks, they like to say that kind of thing.
Well, go back to my example of 7 reasons why the baseboard has to be replaced. You really got to step back and think like,
Absolutely.
Okay, so where I first thought of this is I had a public adjuster talk to me when I was still an adjuster. And he said to me, Leland, I got this problem with this couch that has smoke damage on it. And the insurance company is arguing that there's no legal standard or hygienic standard for the amount of smoke particles that can be on a couch. So they agree that there's smoke particles on the couch, but they don't agree that that it reaches the level
It's
where
negligible amounts is what they're trying to say.
Okay, so
Right.
now see everybody gets fixated. So now both sides are arguing about it's healthy, it's not healthy, it's unhealthy, it's whatever.
It's there, and
Okay,
that's what the
so-
policy covers.
So what I told him is, I said, back up and come at him with, remember the 7 reasons why the baseboard has to be replaced. So I said, come at him with a different reason. So I said, why don't you tell him it's discolored? I'm not trying to tell him to make something up, but if it's discolored, it's discolored. Or what if it smells, right? So whether or not it has smoke particles that reach a certain level where it's unhealthy, if it's discolored or it has a smell, that's a different reason to replace it. And so he called the insurance company up and he said, hey, it's discolored. And so they've been arguing forever about what the standard is for health for smoke particles. And as soon as he called them up and said it's discolored, they paid for it right away.
I've given 4 or 5. I'm thinking about a few claims where I've given like 5 reasons why they needed to do something. And I said, I don't care which one you choose one. I've literally said those words.
Okay. But
Honestly, I remember them still saying no for the ones that I'm thinking of, but I would imagine it's worked more often than it hasn't.
Well,
so
but
either
remember
way,
what you're doing, you're
you're
teeing
laying
up
out
the
your
case.
cards.
You're teeing up the case for the attorney, because then the attorney can go into court and maybe he's going to use all 4 arguments, or maybe he's only going to use number 2. But you're laying a foundation for your attorney. The other thing I would suggest is use 4 good reasons. If you have 3 good reasons and one that's kind of iffy, don't weaken your argument by using an iffy reason. Just use as many really solid reasons that you have, but don't give them a crappy one.
But there's something to be said about leaving a window open for them. If you give a insurance company and you back them into a corner and they have to admit at this point that they were wrong and you were right. They want to save face. They can't admit they were wrong. That would look bad for them if it ended up in court. So you have to give them some kind of a leeway out. They need to save face somehow. So if you leave one thing behind that they can jump on, maybe leave that out to the end, and then they can say, "Oh, we didn't realize that this other thing was the case, so we're going to pay for it for that reason." It had nothing to do with all this other stuff you've been giving us. But giving them that out sometimes allows you to get to the coverage that you need.
Putting them in a corner is right out of Sun Tzu, The Art of War. If you back them into a corner, they may fight harder because they
I need to read that book.
They get so upset.
All right, we are way over time, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. But Leland,
did we answer all the questions though?
Probably
we did. I thought we did the majority anyway.
I think people we got through a lot of them, and we'll just have you on again because I had a lot of fun. You should probably be careful about some of your examples. They're quite violent.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Well, okay. Look, I'm not trying to
We're
say
just joking.
I'm not trying to say we have to fight the insurance company, but it is like an art of war thing. Is that like
absolutely
don't fire your weapon too early?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And everybody's saying thanks.
Chess is probably a better example. And if you play chess, you have to proceed methodically.
Yep.
You can't get all excited and start moving your powerful players just because you like how powerful they are.
Yeah,
so
I agree. There's definitely strategies involved for all of this. Maybe that's what we get into the next time I have you on. How to really set it up.
Okay, exactly. Because I've done consulting with a lot of attorneys, and we spend a lot of time talking about what steps to take and especially what order to take the steps in. There's a lot of times in a claim where I want to ask for something and I won't do it because I want to ask for something else first for a bunch of reasons. And I think that you have to think carefully about, like say if you're all pissed off that they're not paying for the gutters, there might be something else that you should pay attention to that you should ask for instead of the gutters. Maybe the gutters you should ask for last. And sometimes you can ask for something else that will lay the foundation to make it easy to get the gutters.
All right, so we're going to leave the audience wanting more at this point and not give them too much about our next discussion.
Thanks, Leland. I appreciate it, buddy.
Leland, if you hang out in the wings as soon as we end the show, I'll be able to talk to you a little bit more, all right?
So Mr. Huggins works in Texas?
I do not work in Texas. I am in the Southeast.
So tell us
Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina. But I work all over, man. I got what? I'm in federal court in 8 different states right now as we speak. Great. So I'm all over the place, man. Only first party property insurance. I love your insight. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Leland. Wow.
A lot. I love it. He's in depth. You can just tell when somebody's been doing this for a long time, and
I love talking to the guy.
Yeah. I think the theme is it's not checkers, it's chess. So chess, not checkers.
We can't call it a game. So somehow we have to say that it's chess without saying it's chess.
Or we do what Leland does and say it's war.
It's war.
It's war, baby. I love it, man. I'm gonna bounce when I have some issues. I like, because Matt, you and I talk all the time about coverage issues. Every week, multiple times. We just do. And he'd be a good guy to bounce things off of as well. Really,
he absolutely is. So if you want to get a hold of Leland, I know that he's on Facebook. If he's willing, I'll post his email address in the description of the show, so you guys can have that once the replay comes back up. So, but that was fantastic. Next Tuesday, we have Taylor Bezic on, and we're going to talk about the detriment of throwing Jell-O against the wall and other reasons why you don't need to sell unless you know if there is coverage first, even for contractors. Figuring out if there's coverage prior to selling the claim is a good idea. So that's Taylor Bezic next week. If you don't know who that guy is, he is also very intelligent, knows exactly what he's talking about. So don't miss us next week, Tuesdays at 4 p.m. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.
See ya.